Hello, welcome to the It's All Good show. And look who's here for a chat. My name is Denise Belisle, and I'm a serenity expert and positive intelligence specialist. And I'm here because, as I said, it's all good. And I run this show every Monday. And now, today is episode 99. So we're getting close to the 100th episode. And don't miss out next week because we have Nuria that will be coming. She was my guest in the first episode. So now we're going to be talking about things that have happened in the last year and all the changes. But before we get started today, I want to explain why I've called this show It's All Good. It is because, well, you saw my cup. It's my favorite cup. It's all good. And when I decided to do this show, I was drinking out of that cup and I say, hey, I like that saying. I could say that. But as I move forward, I realize that I always say it's all good. And why do I say that? Because things of the past, I can't change them. And things of the future, really, I can't predict them. I can hope, but hope doesn't really create anything. It's just hope. So this is why I call it It's All Good, because the best time to live is right here, right now, and appreciate every second of it. You can't really change the past. You can predict the future. So why not appreciate where you are right now? That's the best place you can be. And today on my show, I have Scott Mason. And Scott is a myth slayer, professional speaker, and transformational executive and leadership coach. Wow, we're going to have a lot of questions for Scott. That's amazing. And let's welcome him right away so that we can say, welcome. So glad to have you here.
I am ecstatic to be here, I've got to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we've had a couple of conversation, and I mean, I love his Scott's energy. I love his drive and his excitement. And summer or winter, you'll see him wear his favorite leather jacket because it's just the way it is. Before I forget, I would like to encourage people that are listening to go and subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring the little bell there so that you're being notified whenever a new video comes on. And as I told you, this one's 99, so there's 99 other episodes to listen to. And if you want to be on the show, or if you want to have conversation with me and you like the way, my brain is going and you'd like to pick my brain, book a call with me, tiny.cc/Denise Belisle. Talk with Denise. So now, Scott, wow, exciting to have you here. You have such charisma, such energy, and you're a gem to talk with. And what I'd like to do, the first question I want to know is, like, really a myth slayer. like I know there's a lot of myth out there, but how, like, tell me a little bit about yourself and let's get started. So how did you become a myth slayer?
Thank you. First of all, before I say anything else, when you talk about energy, charisma, positivity, all that I supposedly have, you've got it in spades too. So I've been so excited about being here.
I think that's why we're like magnet, right? We're attracted to one another.
Exactly. And that's why I think those that are watching or listening to this are going to have a blast today.
I think so.
So how did an ordinary boy from the backwoods of Kansas end up the myth slayer? Sometimes I don't even know myself. I do know that I spent too many years of my life living out toxic myths, living out narratives that have symbolic equivalents in Greek mythology, which is what I talk about, as you know, to my own detriment. And only when I was able to understand the meaning of these myths, visit the oracle within, obliterate them, and write a new book of mythology for myself, was I able to feel free. And when I felt free, I was determined to be able to help as many people as possible get to experience what I have been experiencing ever since. Because too many people, and I was a lawyer, a practicing lawyer for nearly a quarter of a century, so you especially see it there, live there.
So you must have met a lot of myth in there. In the law.
Yeah, right. Like, that's taking the concept of mythology to a whole different level. I mean, people associate myths a lot of time with stories that are untrue, but legal fictions, that's beyond a myth, because a lot of time there isn't even symbolic resonance there. It's just BS.
But how did you succeed to survive there for a quarter of a century?
I didn't.
Seems like a long time.
Yeah, first of all, in a way I didn't. In a way I did, and in a way I didn't. I survived, but as a shell of a human being without a soul.
Hmm.
You know, and this is painful when I think about it, and it's painful even talking about it, but I do feel it's important to be shared, particularly as I reached the height of the earliest iteration of my career. I would wake up every morning, and like many people, I would go to the bathroom and splash water on my face and then look in the mirror. And when I look in the mirror, Denise, I would just see almost like a ceramic carving of a
Hmm.
human face
Yeah.
without anything in the eyes except smoke and fire and rage. I didn't have a soul, and I didn't think anyone else had a soul.
Hmm.
And so, how did I survive? When you lose your soul, you're not alive. You're
Emotionless,
missing.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I had one
You're a
emotion
robot.
that was rage. Yeah. An angry robot.
Hmm.
Nothing
What
more.
kind of law were you practicing?
I practiced a number of different types of law. I was a government official for nearly 20 years, doing everything from supervising administrative law judges to doing major institutional reforms in the social services area to building safety to litigation in the Bronx. And then later, I was chief legal counsel for the country's largest domestic violence shelter provider, all of which should have been fulfilling, but they weren't.
Yeah. I can see though within the work that you've been doing that you had that slayer, you had that fighter inside of you that wanted to come out, but you were locked in with the institution, right? I'm
Absolutely.
sure as much as, they say lawyers, they can help people, but in reality, you're locked into an institution that doesn't allow you to do what you really want to do. So how did you ever come out of that?
So it was a process, but eventually, so during these many years of government service that I engaged in, eventually I was so unhappy,
Mhm.
so miserable, and becoming such a monster inside that I felt I had to take a break. And my unhappiness was externalized, by the way. It's not a good sign when people compare you to Darth Vader on the job. It's not.
Not really, no.
So, so I actually, out of fear of like living like that for the rest of my life, I actually quit. Literally, my pension vested, and 2 weeks later, I resigned without another job. Now,
Mhm.
that was during the middle of the Great Recession, and so there were not a lot of jobs to be had. And it took me actually over a year to find another job, which is how I entered into the nonprofit sector. But that year, I had a complete and utter emotional crash.
Mhm.
But I also began to lay the seeds for the career that would come after those years of nonprofit executive service when I
Yeah.
started to move into entrepreneurship. And that ultimately is what led me down the road to become the Miss Slayer who feels passionate and actually joyful about his life to this day.
That's awesome. I mean, it's such a good transition in a sense that I can understand that year of searching, of
Mhm.
peeling out, the layers of that rock that you were seeing in the mirror, right? You have to chisel out in order to peel the layers and find yourself. And I'm glad you were able to, because
Thank
so
you.
many people, what you describe, and whomever's listening, I'm sure many of them can identify themselves. They wake up in the morning, they look at themselves in the mirror and say, is that it? Is that what life's going to be about for the rest of my life? Do I really, like, they don't even question themselves that far. They're just like, oh, well, let's just go to work and get my paycheck and come back home and do the thing. And I'm glad that you were able to walk away from that, to realize that that was not your true purpose in life. And now you're here helping other people moving out of that.
You said something in that I feel compelled to respond to, because it's something I feel really strongly about. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think one of the legal jobs I had was in building safety. In
Mhm.
fact, I was a building safety regulator, more or less, on 9/11.
Mm.
And, you know, that day, I went to work on the subway just like it was any other day. I remember the
Were you
subway.
working in New York?
Yes, I was
Yeah, yeah.
mere blocks away from the towers when they fell. I was one of the crowds of people running from the dust clouds. And then I worked for years afterwards on skyscraper safety legislation designed to prevent more people from dying should such a horrible incident occur. I worked in the emergency command center for months afterwards too. And Denise, I have to say, one thing that just pounded itself in me forever that goes to what you were talking about, people just like me went to work that day just like it was any other, thinking that their lives would go on for indefinitely, bored, unhappy, feeling stagnant, or I just need to get a paycheck. One day they were walking up into their job, stepping into their office, and a few seconds later, they were jumping for their lives down from 100 feet at the top of that tower,
Mhm.
or 100 stories at the top of that tower, or they were killed instantly, or they were burned alive. And if there's anything that 9/11 taught me, and if there's anything that I ask people to remember from this interview, is that 9/11 shows people by the thousands aren't guaranteed tomorrow. If
Yeah.
we're not happy, if we're stuck or stagnant, it is incumbent upon us to begin to act now.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because I 100% agree with you, because tomorrow's not promised,
It's not.
right? And to also, people also so worry about things of the past, but you can't right the wrong of yesterday. You can only do your best today. So how would you write today and do everything you can today in order to move your life and have an extraordinary life, right?
Uh, uh, So that goes as to something that I'm so glad that you raised. Now, when it comes to analyzing what is keeping us stuck and stagnant and from living our fullest lives, one of the things that I like to do with my clients is have them assess the myths that they are acting out in their own lives. And I do that through a framework that's based on the genres of Greek myths that exist, that I believe are metaphors for various places within the human condition. And one of those myths that are destructive, I call them toxic myths, is
Mhm.
called the tragic origin myth. It's basically a myth, and you
The
see this
tragic what?
origin.
Okay.
And you see it over and over in mythology. It's how someone was born into a terrible set of circumstances, and until there's some sort of intervention, their life is just headed on this horrible trajectory. Too many people of the sort that you're talking about are living out the tragic origin myth every day. I was
Mhm.
born poor. I was born without knowing anyone. I was this, I was that when I was a child. They don't necessarily understand that these narratives are driving them forward, but they can. And if they're keeping you from self optimizing, should be changed.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you. Often people are giving their power away by saying, it's not my fault I was born in a poorer area. It's not my fault my father beat me when I was young. It's not my fault I got raped at the age of 13. It's not my fault that I'm like that because of. But once you change your narrative, once you change your, it's not my fault, not that it's your fault you got raped. That's not what I'm saying.
Of
But
course.
once you take the power back, once you say, right now I could do things differently and I'm in charge of my life, and I can't change the past, as we mentioned. I can't change the whatever happened, the wrong. I can't write them. but you can learn to live today by learning from the experience of yesterday and moving into the next minute with that knowledge, and take power and say, I am 100% responsible for what happened to me from now on, because I have my power. I'm never going to blame anybody else's for the things that are happening in my life, because I'm in charge, I'm in power. And that changed totally people's way of living their life, right?
What role are you playing in the myth that you are writing for your past and your
Hmm.
future? Are
Yeah.
you playing the victim, a monster, a villain, a fool, a bystander in your own story? Or are you choosing to be the Homer or the Hesiod of your own myth, the author of your myth? The whole story of Achilles in Greek mythology is about this exact topic. Achilles had been told that if he went into the Trojan War, he would die young. And because he was afraid of that, he actually spent many years of his life pretending to be a princess and living on this remote island where no one would find him. And the reason he was afraid of death, by the way, was that if you died as an ordinary mortal in Greek mythology, you lost your memory, you lost your consciousness. He made a choice eventually to step out of that, go fight in the war. And the beauty of that was when you chose to author your own myth and take on the role of a hero, you didn't lose your consciousness or your memories when you died. You became like a god. And that goes as to the power of what each of us can do when we choose to become the author of our own myths and make sure that we write ourselves a heroic journey in which we end up Olympians.
So tell me, how did you, I love that, I love that story. And how did you end up using the Greek mythology into your practice, into your teaching, into your transformation for your clients? Where did that
I,
come from?
I'll be honest with you, Denise. I don't know. I've loved them since I was a little boy.
Yeah.
I have read everything that there is to read about them my entire life. And when I began to move into transformational coaching, I began to understand that this was a theme that kept emerging over and over and over. And if there's anything that I've learned, and that I, by the way, ask my clients to learn, and I'd be shocked if you don't urge those that you work with to learn as well, is that the themes that appear over and over in your life, the voices or the issues or the frameworks that are speaking to you, are there for a reason. And so for
Hmm.
me, being true to myself was really starting to understand, why are these ancient gods and goddesses speaking to me? And what are they trying to say? And when I sat
Yeah,
down and really thought about my own life and what lessons they've taught me, it all became clear.
that's pretty cool. And so did that came together when you were taking that year off after,
It
or later
wasn't.
on?
Yeah, it was later on. So I had another legal job after that, but I had some side hustles that were entrepreneurial. I went and I owned another company as my first entrepreneurial venture. And then I separated from my business partner after a few years. And at that point, I realized that this was my last and best chance to really be who and what I needed to be. And
Hmm.
so that is when I had the time to visit the oracle, listen to
Mm.
what she had to say about who and what I was meant to be, document, go through an entire process that I've written down and put into place for my clients to use, so they can save time. Don't have to go through what I went through. And then eventually began to understand that this is where my entire life's set of interests and experiences were pointing me to. They were the formula that created my purpose.
Hmm. When you say I talk to my oracle, when
Yes.
I hear the word oracle, I think of the Matrix. So, so who's
Amazing,
the
right?
oracle? Like, who's the oracle, and why is there a moral requirement to hear her? So how
Mm.
do you meet your oracle? Like, how does that work?
Thank you. First of all, I love that you mentioned the Matrix because she really was a great modernization of the ancient Greek oracle. For those who don't know, in ancient Greece, the oracle was a prophetess and a priestess of the god Apollo. And she had a temple in a town called Delphi or Delphi. Both pronunciations are okay. And it's still there, by the way. And anyone could go and visit her. You were allowed to ask one question and one question only. She'd give you an answer that, like the oracle in the Matrix, felt like a little bit of a jumble, but it was always true. And that is what I asked the oracle within me. All of the Greek gods and goddesses and other characters from mythology are really just externalizations of things within everyone, you, me, and everyone listening to or watching this show. And so visiting the oracle is understanding, is first of all, hearing the words that she says, which may seem confusing, but then thinking about them, pondering, and deciding in what way you were going to interpret them and then act, but in a way that was true. The oracle is the voice of the heart. She's the intuition. If you listen to her, the right direction will always follow.
Yeah, I like that. What I feel in my life experience is that not often enough people are sitting down and asking the question and listening to the answers.
Yeah.
We're so much in the go, 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 and not stopping. And even when we're unhappy or we just like keep going, we don't ask question. We don't ask ourselves, where do I want, what should I do? What's my next step? How can I find true happiness? How can I, really use my full power to support this society, or regardless of what that is? People are, unfortunately, they're not taught to do that. So how can we support people to do more of that?
Yeah. First of all, I think it involves understanding that the oracle exists and that her voice isn't just some abstract thing, but it really is something that points to the heart where we need to go. I strongly urge that those who are feeling confused take the time to regularly find space alone, maybe with just a journal, maybe on a bicycle or walking around a park, maybe while meditating, some sort of space alone where they can listen. And think not just about concretely what their mission or their vision might look like, but symbolically what it looks like. For instance, I have my clients do what's called an inner archaeological dig, where we pretend they are in Turkey or Greece and digging through mounds. What do you find from your childhood? And what does that symbolically represent about who you truly are? I have them identify their strengths and their weaknesses. And then I also, importantly, because the oracle's prophecies will play out in a good way or bad way, depending on how you deal with what I'm about to say, I have them spend a lot of time understanding their inner truth values. And then literally, we bake all of that together and come up with a recipe that I call a new mythological foundation. It's a broad vision for their future from which a more detailed mission that will take them to their own Mount Olympus can be built.
Wow, that's quite a process.
It's too difficult. Look, I always tell people, you can figure out your purpose, your vision, your mission, and all of this symbolic stuff that's in the back of your mind on your own. Anyone can do it. You just need time, effort, discipline, and accountability to yourself. And if you're able to do all of that without being distracted by everything here or there, then you don't need me. You don't need a coach. You don't need a podcast. You don't need a book. You don't need anything. The problem is almost no one can do that. And the only reason I was able to was because I was unemployed for a year and a half and at wit's end. And even then, the oracle didn't come to me or speak to me when I wanted her to. She came to me when I was riding a bicycle in the middle of the night on a rainy day in Central Park. And that's when she spoke. But even then, I had the time, due to this gap in my life, to be able to process it. I would not wish that sort of gap on anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to tell people and would urge them, please, if you're feeling dissatisfied or stuck or frustrated, find someone that can help you with that process before you are a year into unemployment and looking at your bank account like I was and saying, am I going to be able to make the rent next month? Because
Yeah.
that ain't a pretty place to be hearing the oracle from, let me tell you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And but what led you to really shift from, because you, as you mentioned, you went back into law, but
Yeah.
in a different perspective.
Yeah.
And but what really led you to do coaching full time, like to become the myth slayer and help these people transform and learn more about leadership? What was the transition, like the final transition? So, okay, I
Yeah.
gotta do that. I gotta get out of this world and move into this one full time.
The oracle spoke to me, but I sat on her words
Mm-hmm.
during that period that I was in the nonprofit. And then, like I mentioned, I was at in another entrepreneurial enterprise that didn't work out for a host of reasons, um, that had nothing to do with either my business partner or myself. It was just we had different visions for the company. But at that point, I realized I've been through 3 careers now,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them, for one reason or another, aren't working out. And one way or another, I'm ending up banging my head against the wall. And the only person that I could blame for that, it was, of course, fun and easy earlier in my career to blame everyone else.
Yeah, it's easy to blame others.
Exactly. And Denise, does it feel good or what? Temporarily,
Mm-hmm.
until you
Mm-hmm.
realize, like you mentioned earlier, it makes you feel like a victim. And
Mm-hmm.
so at some point, I was like, wait a minute, everyone in every situation I'm in can't be wrong. Really, the person who's wrong is me. And so,
Yeah.
how can I turn this around? So, part of it was, again, a disorganized version of the process that I've documented and created as my signature program. But it was, okay, what are these stories that I'm telling myself that keep putting me in these situations where I'm miserable? What is the truth about who and what I'm meant to be? What is the oracle saying? And then how can I build a plan to make it happen? Now, one of the things I learned in my C-suite positions was that in order to get any major initiative done, you actually need to write down things like the goals and the tactics, and then move towards them, document it, and then
Yeah.
regularly check in and follow up. And so I literally did that. I put together a strategic plan for my life,
Yeah.
and it worked. It worked. Before long, I knew what I was meant to be, and I was regularly taking steps to get there. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is something that I can share with other people.
Mm-hmm.
We're all
Mm-hmm.
here, I think. In fact, I think that there's an ethical imperative around this, to use the skills and experiences and the gifts that we have to help others. And with that service orientation as my new commitment, moving into this new role became almost a natural flow. It just organically
Yeah.
happened. And
Yeah.
here I am
Yeah.
getting to talk to you.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. And so, if people are listening and they say, would I be one to work with him? So who do you work with? Like what does a client look like for you?
A client is usually, I would say, a key example would be an attorney or some other executive who has been in one of 2 situations. Number one, they're frustrated. They're exactly what I was. They hate it. They are billing all these hours. They're tired. I knew someone once whose whole career was spent basically filing minor papers in ongoing sets of litigation between 2 razor manufacturers because they were constantly accusing each other of stealing each other's ideas, right? She wanted a little bit more from her Yale law degree than that. So if you're someone that is in that situation but needs a process to help you figure out what it is because the day-to-day is too overwhelming, your homie is here, can and will help and has been there. The other sort of person who is someone who might have been a professional of some sort or another that had a large individual contribution component, again, like a lawyer in a corporate law department or an accountant who is stepping into leadership or whose leadership role is escalating. And again, is feeling like something is keeping them back, but they don't have a process for figuring out who and what that is. A lot of time it manifests itself as imposter syndrome or extreme insecurity. Really what it is that they, again, have not listened to the oracle. They are toxic myths that are
Mm-hmm.
keeping them in one place when really as a leader they need to become something else. If you are either of those sorts of professionals, a stuck and stagnant one, or the leader who's looking to become a great leader, or who might be
Mm-hmm.
even screwing up as a leader, I'm your person.
Wow, that's awesome. And so when people start working with you, are you integrating the Greek mythology into your coaching? Do you teach them? Because for me, let's say I was to start working with you, I have no idea of the Greek mythology. So do you kind of give them a crash course on how that works and what that is? And
There is a fair amount of homework. It's not oppressive. I try and make it fun. Really, what starts to happen is I begin to view myth itself as a metaphor. So I ask them to write down the story of their life as if it were a myth. I ask them to write down what their future might look like if they don't change their current myths. And then, as that begins to happen, I start to talk to them about the symbolic equivalence of some of the things that I'm seeing. What inevitably happens, in fact, it's happened, I think, every time, is that suddenly the client becomes obsessed with some mythological figure. It might be Achilles, it might be Athena. It might be,
yeah, it's
I'm surprised
interesting.
sometimes it's some obscure deity that even I'd forgotten about. But this emerges out of their subconscious and they want to research it. They say, why am I not able to get this out of my mind? Sometimes their families get involved and their children are researching it on Wikipedia or whatever. And that's when I know change is about to happen. You'd be
Uh-huh.
surprised by what you know and what emerges when the oracle is starting to demand to be heard.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that must feel for the client, that must feel like a big revelation, right? Like they find something inside of them, right?
Oh, Denise, it's beautiful because who and what these figures are, again, because they ultimately are rooted in universal subconscious experiences, a lot of times have things associated with them, either stories or uh, imagery or iconography. And a lot of times then we'll talk about, well, what does this iconography mean to you? For instance, there's a goddess by the name of Irene, who's the goddess of peace. Now, a client of mine, I had not thought about Irene myself for decades. Who has even heard of her? But this client of mine suddenly, after researching about Greek gods and goddesses, became fixated on this very obscure deity. And this really spoke to her because she is someone who seeks peace in her
Mhm.
life. And there were a lot of images associated with the statues or the paintings of this goddess, particularly, for instance, a baby. Well, she cares a lot about children. She wants children to grow up in a world that's peaceful. That
Yeah.
ties directly then into what is the true meaning behind what her mission needs to be. So that's an
Mhm.
example of how really interesting revelatory things can come out because of this. People can have deeper understanding, and that deeper understanding can lead them to living out their truth.
Mhm. What I heard from what you said is once you start to investigate a little bit more about the outside world, which is the Greek mythology. So if you do some research, because it's outside, right? I mean, it's history, it's in the
Yeah,
book, it's in the internet, whatever. But then by doing that, you have client that found their inner goddess, their inner god, their inner
yes,
strength. They and then it helps them to really live their passion so
yes.
that they can move forward and be a better executive, be a better leader, be a better human being, be a better mother, be a better father, right?
who that deity or that figure is a representation of who you want to become. And if you
Hmm.
have that North Star, the decisions that you make, as well as the vision and the mission that you create as the author of your own myth for the future, become crystal clear.
Mm, that's beautiful. You just have to listen, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I was working last week about a workshop that I'm developing, and it's about creating your values and then finding your purpose. And
Yeah.
in the purpose section, I tell people that your purpose is not something you have to look for right now. Look at your life in the past, look at how you lived your life, look at what was your passion, what were you excited about, and that was creating that's your purpose. Look at the things that you would do just because you're so excited to do. Look at the things that are happening in your life, and that's your purpose. You don't have to create it right now. You don't have to say, oh, what am I creating for a purpose? It's inside of you, right? And that's your inner deity, I imagine.
I love it. And it's also that inner archaeological dig. And when you think about the archaeological dig as a metaphor, you don't just dig up an entire ancient city in the snap of a finger. It isn't a process.
Yeah.
Gradually start digging and you see something's there, and then you dig up more and more and more and more and more. I love it. And you know, that's fun because who doesn't want to or need to, in one way or another, connect with their inner child? And one more thing I just have to say on this topic, too. I know that most people are not going to go into their childhood, follow an exercise like the one you just described, and find Greek mythology and say, I will be talking about Greek mythology as a lens for personal and professional transformation. I know that that's on the outer fringe of what people might find, but by being on the outer fringe, I show what's possible. I would never have imagined that my childhood interest in Greek mythology would be driving me to professional freedom. Yet here I am. Imagine if your interests are more mundane. Imagine what's possible for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I love that. Well, look at the time. It's already over 30
Ah,
minutes and we talk, it's crazy.
uh,
So, so before I'll ask you for the one tip afterwards, but let's see how we can talk with Scott. So how people can reach you, and I have this here, so they can go on your website. So what will they find when they go there?
they will find, first of all, some interesting reading about my background, about why Greek myths spoke to me, as well as some basics about my signature program. They also will find a link to talk to me if they want to. And I love talking to people. Hey, look at us. We could talk for hours.
We
Why does
could.
the show have to end? Why are you doing this to me?
I know. We might have to do a redo in a few months. I've done that before. I did.
I think that would be a blast.
And you have a gift, a couple of gifts, two
I
gifts. So
do.
explain what those gifts are.
First of all, we're talking about inner childhood and archaeological digs. Yes, let's dig up some gifts. Christmas, when I was 5, was like the best day of every year. So, gift number one, hopefully this will feel like Christmas for you or for anyone who's listening or watching, is a free copy of my ebook called Charismatic Olympian. And by the way, it has some cool illustrations in it. And it is explaining in detail exactly how Greek mythology helped me transform and can help you find professional freedom. All you need to do is reach out to me through my website, and I would be happy to send that to you. Just ask for it, and the oracle will
Wonderful.
give.
And what's the 5 minutes professional freedom
Yes.
assessment?
So, also, if you reach out to me via my website, I love talking to people. Absolutely complimentary, no pressure, about how they can up level their leadership and find professional freedom for themselves. Whether it, again, is because they're feeling stuck or stagnant in where they're at now, or because they feel like the full agency that leadership can provide is not happening for them because they're stuck or stagnant as leaders. And I basically sit down and talk to them. They don't need to know anything about Greek mythology. I talk to them about their lives. I get a sense as to what myths might be holding them back, and then give them some advice about how they might be able to begin to move forward. And by the way, if they're interested in becoming a little bit more charismatic,
Mm.
I might give them a tip or two about that too. They just need to ask.
So I have a feeling that that 5 minute professional assessment is a little bit longer than 5 minutes.
Yes, it's actually 45 minutes.
Yeah. Was there a
Otherwise, we
four
talk
missing
really
there?
fast.
Yeah, I imagine that, it's just a little bit longer. So I might have to change that in the show note because you gave me 5 minutes. Maybe
I'm
you
hey, my
mistyped the
error.
four. Yeah, you mistyped the four, which is fine.
And I've been known to do.
Yes. So before we go, so what's the one tip you could give our listener about how they can start slaying their own myth?
Think about the role that you are playing in your life. Is the role that you're writing for yourself tragic, or are you writing yourself as an Olympian, someone who's fully self actualized and creating a universe of your own making? If it's not the latter, start thinking about it, make a change.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. Yeah, you gotta ask yourself those questions. It's
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
So stay there, Scott. I'll be right back with you. I'll say goodbye to everyone. So thank you for being here, Scott. It was such a pleasure to have you on my show. I'll have to have you again in the future in my third year because the second year is coming soon. Like next August is the celebration of my second year of this show. So I'll get you in.
And by the way, I
Yeah,
heard some trumpets from Mount Olympus saying, congratulations.
thank you. Thank you so much. So stay there. I'll be right back with you. Wow, that was amazing. You see, that's why I have that full range of amazing people coming to me and experiencing this show with me. Lucas here for a chat because you can learn so much from all my guests, and I'm super excited. So now, also, don't forget you can subscribe on my YouTube channel by going to YouTube/ at Denise Belisle and click on subscribe and click on the bell to be notified every time I have either a short or a video coming up. And if you want to talk with me, whether you want to be on the show, whether you want me to have my free 45-minute consultation, just like Scott was talking about, I invite you to join me and book a call on my calendar. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you. So until next time, be kind to one another. I'm so happy to have Scott here today. I hope you got great value from him, and I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.